most people have almost, Ward Cleaver type values and worlds that they move in very comfortably. Cyberspace, gene therapy, virtual reality, nanotechnology, interstellar travel, life extension. These things enliven the experience of reading the newspaper, but they don't come tangential to most people's lives. On the other hand, some people, the technical community that's creating these things, the cadres of media people who must understand and re-explain this stuff back to the general public, they breathe and eat this stuff. And some people, like myself, I guess, are ambivalent go-betweens between it. Human beings have always existed sociologically and aesthetically and conventionally over a much broader spectrum of behaviors and attitudes than any other species we're familiar with. But that difference has undergone like a hyperinflationary explosion in the last 15 years, largely because, there are so many reasons, gender redefinition, the rise of the internet, the emergence of the super rich, the emergence of the super poor, the emergence of the totally wired, the emergence of the totally disconnected, and also the awareness that the growing sophistication of propaganda, which makes all honest efforts to establish a level playing field of discourse easily subverted. I mean, every time you think you're having an honest discussion or making an honest appraisal of a situation, if you pull back one level, you discover you're embedded in other people's agendas and other people's and institutions' styles of manipulating reality. I mentioned to you Eric Davis's book. It hasn't come out yet, Technosis. When it does come out, I urge you to read it for all kinds of reasons. One I would mention here is that it showed me that everyone, including myself, and that was the big shock for me, is a creature of their time, and that it's very hard not to serve invisible agendas where you don't realize that you think the way you think for reasons entirely divorced from who you are, where you are, and what's good for you. For example, in the Middle Ages, Christian piety permeated every level of society and every act and every thought, even of the critics of Christian piety. It wasn't that there were people who stood apart from it. If you defined yourself by attacking it, you nevertheless were defined by it. I think I mentioned recently or somewhere or sometime that back when I was a student at Berkeley, once during a riot, people dropped a banner off a third floor dorm balcony that said, it was a quote from Jean-Paul Sartre, "We cannot transcend Marxism until we transcend the conditions that have created it." And in a way, we cannot transcend the social, political, and philosophical reality that we are now very uncomfortably situated in until we transcend the conditions that create it. But we are those conditions. The momentum of our ideologies is the main thing holding together the illusion of any coherency at all. I mean, the people who are really with it are really difficult to understand. And they're their effort to communicate is maddeningly unsuccessful, I think, for them and for us. The balkanization of discourse, the proliferation of special vocabularies, the generation of unstated professional assumptions, the we all know kind of sense of reality out of which then statements can be made, tends to island discourse. And yet, if discourse is islanded, community becomes nearly impossible. Well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It seems to me, the conclusions that we've drawn from these meetings that we've had, which themselves have been plagued by this kind of fragmentation and dissipation. I mean, people have Feldenkrais things to do. They have processing to do. They have to meet their connection. They have something else to do that busts up their loyalty to even the idea of 6 consecutive meetings on the subject of chaos.
They're living it.
Yes, no, we're living it, but, the important thing is to realize that you're living it and that that's what it is, What I come away from all this with is that looking at the future, much of which is already in place. I mean, don't imagine that the world will look greatly different in 5 or 10 years. It may look slightly different. This world we're living in, the world of 1998, to the camera's eye, is indistinguishable from the world of 1990. And yet, the most elaborate and sophisticated technical artifact in the history of mankind has been put in place in those 8 years, the rise of the internet. But, who runs into it? Who stumbles over it? Who sees it? It's odorless, tasteless, invisible. We all had computers in 1990. It's simply that they were large paperweights. Now they have become telepathic creatures. And while we natter over the implications of all of this, they freely converse with each other in a planetary-wide environment and evolve themselves toward, whatever destiny lies in wait for the machine logos that we have pulled into existence. So, this future which is already here has implications that few of us have fully grokked, I think. And I listed 3 of them just as a crib to help me through this. First of all, that there is no closure. All ideology is now exposed as an adolescent response to being. If the 20th century taught us anything, it taught us the toxic nature of ideology. The excesses of the left led to the Holocaust. The excesses of the right led to the pogroms and mass trials of Stalinist Russia, the excesses of the Cultural Revolution in China, the suppression of dissent in many parts of the world. So there is a need to abandon ideology, which is really a postmodern position, and it's very uncomfortable. The absence of closure is a post-juvenile stance toward being that few people in the past ever lived long enough to grow comfortable with. If you died at age 40, culture as a con game lasts long enough to keep you entranced up until sometime in midlife. If you live beyond midlife and you still are fascinated and entranced by culture, chances are you're an idiot of some sort. I mean, is this not obvious? You know, I mean, after the this is why, I mean, marketing has shrewdly understood this. This is why we are folded back toward the idolization of youth, because it's an idolization of cluelessness. You know, it's not the firm body and the quick step that the marketers are interested to sell you. It's innocence. But innocents are people you love to play poker with if you are sufficiently cynical. And believe me, the market forces are sufficiently cynical. So assimilating to the future means living not with no ideology whatsoever, or with, and people say, well, can one live without ideologies? Isn't the belief we should, you know, strive for peace and justice and ideology? I don't think so. I think these are provisional models of behaviors that derive from immediate practical concerns that can be revised in real time, constantly held up to the incoming flow of data and adjusted. That's why the concept model is somewhat, you know, if Lenin had said he had a model, if Hitler had said he had a model, I think it would have played out with a little more soft conclusions than to say, you know, a new truth is proclaimed and the behaviors which derive from it are incontrovertible. So no ideological closure. And I don't know how you feel about this. I'm very comfortable with it. I was passionate about ideology in my youth. I've had most of them. You know, at 11, I was reading Mein Kampf, and Festung Europa sound like a very good idea. I loved all that pseudo-Egyptian, overscale, tasteless architecture and all that stuff. Folk dancing and summer camping sounded attractive. At 17, I was a Marxist, you know, ready to go to the barricades for the workers' state. At 22, we marched under the black flag of anarchy, used to bust up meetings of Trotskyites and write graffiti on their front doors and make life hell for those people. Now I don't give a shit, and I feel much better about it, thank you. I mean, I think we should strive for a sane and caring world that gives as many people as much choice to express themselves as possible. Beyond that, I don't feel any kind of an imperative.